Cynthia Sayer's accomplishments in the world of jazz are extremely significant when one considers that she is openly acknowledged as a musician's musician in a genre of music which is not only dominated by men, but rarely embraces the banjo as a valid jazz instrument beyond the rhythm section. While the path to this unique position was not without its share of heartache and often seemingly insurmountable barriers, the additional measure of strength and dedication which were necessary to overcome them are reflective of the character of this exceptional woman. Cynthia Sayer was born in Waltham, Massachusetts. The Sayer family moved to New Jersey when she was 6, and it was there that her musical training began. First on piano, then viola, guitar, and drums. It wasn't until the insistent pestering of her parents for a drum set resulted in the compromise of a banjo that she'd ever even considered playing the instrument. While the banjo itself held little interest for the high school student, Cynthia really liked her banjo teacher, Patty Fisher, who was the first adult living an artist lifestyle with whom Cynthia had come into contact. Fisher not only guided Sayer into productive playing of the plectrum banjo, but became a role model and good friend as well. Just out of high school, Cynthia was ready to get her feet wet in the professional music business. Following her first paying gig as part of an all-female band playing for the New York Mets at Shea Stadium, Sayer began performing around New York City, including a regular weekend gig at her father's mustache in Greenwich Village. While studying English and drama at New York's Ithaca College, she also frequently performed as a duo with college friend Don Rickenbach. While her banjo playing was an enjoyable pastime and responsible for generating extra spending money, she never considered it to be more than that. At that time, Cynthia had yet to take the banjo seriously and never considered music or the banjo as a profession. Little did she know how her life was about to change. Following college and uncertain as to what to do with her future, Cynthia was preparing to enter law school when she conducted an introspective self-assessment and came to this conclusion. The banjo could either be as corny or as serious as she chose to make it. It also offered her the potential of being independent, working for herself, and having a lot of fun. When weighing her vision of a life of adventure and creative fulfillment against the drudgery of a 9-to-5 job, Cynthia abandoned her plans for law school and moved to New York to become a full-time professional musician. Although she had long experienced an instinctive attraction to jazz, it wasn't until while in her mid-20s that Cynthia really became connected to the music. For an aspiring jazz musician, gigging around New York City proved to be a great training ground. Seeing the focused drive and enthusiasm of the young banjoist, seasoned musicians in New York's jazz scene helped her whenever possible. Yet, as jazz is, by its very nature, an extremely personal form of creative musical expression, the bulk of the work necessary for her to find her own unique voice needed to be done by Cynthia herself. Upon hearing the landmark recording, Harlem Banjo by Elmer Snowden, Sayer became excited and immediately enlightened to the potential for the banjo in jazz. Without hesitation, she knew that this was the direction in which she wanted to take her music. While previous musical training made it easy for Cynthia to hear the chords and melody within a song, it was those first experiments in jazz and taking the musical risks associated with improvisation that she found most challenging. Her first modest excursions away from the melody, fearful of sounding ridiculous or not being able to execute what she had in mind, soon gave way to ever-expanding musical parameters. When her approach to jazz banjo evolved into something which was driven more by feel, heart, and experimentation, and less by her accumulated knowledge of structured music, Cynthia became a true jazz musician. Because her musical focus was as much about jazz as the banjo, the list of Cynthia's sources of musical inspiration reads much differently than that of most contemporary banjo players. In addition to Elmer Snowden, her preferences in jazz banjo players includes Jimmy Mazzy and Eddie Davis. And, as is the case with any true jazz artist, inspiration came to Cynthia from many sources outside of her own instrument. The phrasing, riffs, and feel of instrumentalists and vocalists, both old and new, and from all styles of music, as well as her own experiences with other musical instruments, were all absorbed and reprocessed into what was becoming Cynthia Sayer's unique and recognizable banjo and vocal style. While the role of a woman in jazz often includes facing unnecessary or unfair obstacles into certain professional circles, those female jazz artists who possess both the musical credentials as well as the perseverance to establish themselves are on occasion able to dissolve the gender barrier and be welcomed into the jazz fraternity as one of the guys. As a true compliment to her musicianship, Cynthia Sayer achieved this status. For example, her solo debut album, The Jazz Banjo of Cynthia Sayer, featured legendary jazz musicians Milt Hinton and Dick Wellstud. Following the recording sessions, Wellstud gave Cynthia the highest praise possible from a jazz musician by stating, "I usually hate banjo players, but you I like." Eager to establish herself in a broad musical marketplace, the enterprising Sayer made the most of every opportunity to enhance her growing reputation in a variety of musical settings. A frequent musical collaborator of Eddie Davis, the two worked together on such projects as the Broadway revival of Whoopee, as well as a Spike Jones-style band entitled the New York Society for the Preservation of Illegitimate Music. Cynthia performed at the White House in 1984 with actor George Segal and was a founding member of the New York Banjo Ensemble, eventually becoming the driving force behind the continued success of the group. In 1987, Sayer traveled to Europe with banjo masters Buddy Walker and Bela Fleck as part of the Legends of the Banjo Tour, and later that year was voted the best overall four-string banjo player in the Frets Magazine Readers' Poll. Her reputation as a respected musician and engaging entertainer firmly established, the ensuing years have seen Cynthia embark on even more interesting musical adventures. Following a critically acclaimed 1991 European tour, she traveled throughout the Middle East and Asia on behalf of the U.S. Department of Defense as part of the New Orleans Classic Jazz Orchestra. She was a headline entertainer aboard both the Delta Queen and ocean-going luxury cruise ships, performed at countless jazz and banjo festivals around the world, shared the stage and recording studio with legendary musicians such as Bucky Pizzarelli, Les Paul, George Segal, and Bela Fleck, and was declared the official banjo player of the New York Yankees, which made her name the subject of a question in the popular board game Trivial Pursuit. A versatile multi-instrumentalist, Sayer became the piano player and featured vocalist with Woody Allen's New Orleans Jazz Band, and takes particular pride in her 2001 featured guest appearance on the National Public Radio program Piano Jazz with Marion McPartland. In addition to producing numerous solo recorded musical projects, Cynthia is active in the film industry as well, appearing in feature films such as Wild Man Blues, Sophie's Choice, Bullets Over Broadway, and Purple Rose of Cairo. And, in an ambitious project, Sayer is also taking the producer's role in the creation of a new documentary film about the banjo. The diverse and encompassing career of Cynthia Sayer is nowhere near its end. Thus, this story can be brought to no real conclusion other than to say to be continued. Until the next installment, these words from the trailer of her film Banjo seem to best illustrate the respect and affection which she holds for the instrument and shares with the world.
I've been playing professionally since I was 17 years old. I really love it. But when I tell people I'm a banjoist, I get some interesting reactions. Some think it's just great, and some dismiss it because the instrument is so stereotyped and so misunderstood. Everyone knows what a banjo is, but they don't know what it's capable of doing. Banjo has such a strong personality. We feel compelled to attach a character to it. Something about it is bare bones honest, fun-loving, and hard-working. So, well, it's so American. matter how or where it's played, the banjo connects us to American music and its history. It's a part of our cultural identity.